The new Volkswagens are here. The second generation of a brand new generation of Volkswagen cars, the Scirocco and the Rabbit. The Dasher started the new generation with its water-cooled engine and other revolutionary features. The idea was to build a completely new line of cars that would have roominess, riding comfort, handling ease, excellent gas mileage, and low exhaust emissions. An important part of the idea was to be able to build from this car, creating other models that would be able to use many of its component parts that are interchangeable, making servicing easier and stocking parts less expensive. The next step has been taken with the introduction of the Scirocco and Rabbit. All three cars have been designed around what Mr. Lighting calls the building block concept. For example, the engine on all three cars is the same, a 1.5-liter overhead cam water-cooled engine developing 70 SAE horsepower at 5,800 RPM. The front axle is basically the same, as are the heating, ventilation, and electrical systems. But the building block concept also allows great flexibility. The most obvious change from the Dasher and most other cars is the engine is mounted sideways. The conventional method of mounting inline and V-type engines with the crankshaft aligned fore and aft, as shown here in the Dasher, is not really necessary or important with front-wheel drive. The transverse Scirocco and Rabbit engine transmission arrangement for both manual and automatic transmission cars makes for a more efficient use of the engine compartment space and improved access to components. It allows a shorter engine compartment than in the Dasher, and it means the transmission and drivetrain is also different from the Dasher, although the engine is the same. We'll come back to the engine compartment later, but first, let's get a more general idea of what we have in these two cars. The Scirocco was designed as a sporty car, while the Rabbit is more of a family car and can accommodate up to 5 people. Mechanically, both cars are practically identical. The differences are in the body styles and interior configurations. Overall length of the Scirocco is 155.7 inches and wheelbase is 94.5 inches. The Rabbit is somewhat shorter and higher than the Scirocco. These views show the biggest difference between the two cars. The Rabbit on the right is more comfortable for passengers in the rear seat, while the Scirocco on the left is basically designed in a 2+2 configuration. The front bucket seats in both cars are in the Volkswagen tradition, designed by orthopedic experts to give solid comfort to driver and passenger. They are individually adjustable front to back, as is the angle of the backrest. The car is built for comfort, even luxury in driving. The instrument panel, for instance, has been carefully designed so the quickest glance will give the driver the information he needs. The Scirocco dash features a full speedometer-sized tachometer in the sports car tradition, and a resettable odometer is included in the speedometer housing. A voltmeter and a quartz clock are included in the center console. On the Rabbit, the tachometer is replaced by a speedometer-sized quartz clock. Safety is built into these cars in many ways. Take the steering column. In case of a front impact in a car equipped with manual transmission, the leaf spring shown in red will give way and the column swings to the side. In automatic transmission cars, the steering column is additionally equipped with a telescoping element. After the column swings out to the side, it also telescopes. The Scirocco and the standard Rabbit have a 3-point safety belt, but some of the Rabbits have an optional automatic seat belt. It is fastened at one end to the door so that when the door is closed, it covers the chest without a special hookup. This is Volkswagen's new passive restraint system. Again, on the Rabbit only, as part of the passive restraint system, a special knee bar prevents the front seat passenger or driver from sliding forward in case of front-end impact. This feature takes the place of the airbag, which some manufacturers offer as a high-cost option. The Rabbit luggage compartment deserves special attention. It is roomy to begin with and is expandable in several different ways, as these drawings show. With the rear seat in its normal position, there is as much room as many larger cars have, 12.4 cubic feet. The rear seat backrest can be folded forward over the rear seat cushion to allow large luggage to be carried. Even larger luggage can be carried by upending the seat cushion with the backrest folded forward. So far, we've talked about the features of the new cars from the customer's viewpoint. One thing that no words or pictures can tell you is the excellent riding comfort, superb handling, and nimble response of both the Scirocco and Rabbit. These characteristics you have to experience yourself by driving the cars. Now that we've had an overall view of the Rabbit and Scirocco, let's talk about how the cars were designed from start to finish with easy serviceability in mind. A case in point is that service intervals have been extended. Maintenance is required only every 15,000 miles, with an oil change every 5,000 miles. This means that the pre-delivery service and 1,000-mile checkup are more important than ever. Here are the main features that are new with the Scirocco and Rabbit. We said before that the electrical system was similar to the Dasher. However, the fuse and relay board is located under the dash to the left of the steering wheel. Fuses and relays are easily accessible for replacement. The wiring harnesses terminate in plugs, which fit into the rear of the fuse board. Each plug is keyed so it cannot be inserted in the wrong socket. From the back of this board, with the help of the wiring diagram, it is a simple matter to trace many of the electrical circuits in the car. The front suspension features McPherson strut and rack and pinion steering. Toe-in is adjusted on the right-hand tie rod only, and the suspension strut is bolted to the wheel bearing housing for easy replacement. To adjust camber, loosen both suspension strut bolts, then turn the upper attachment bolt, which is eccentric, until the required camber is obtained. Tighten nuts and check camber again to assure it's right. If necessary, readjust. The rear suspension is really different. It's called an independent stabilizer axle. Its main elements are a steel torsion beam, indicated by the green arrow, and welded-on trailing arms. This is a surprisingly simple but very effective independent wheel suspension system. When only one wheel hits a bump, the torsion bar can twist as much as necessary to absorb the deflection, while the other wheel stays firmly on the ground. The suspension struts are integral units, combining coil springs and shock absorbers, and are bolted to the body. As in the Dasher, the braking system is dual diagonal. Right front and left rear are on one system, and the other two are on another system. If one system fails, the car can be brought to a straight line stop with the help of its negative roll radius. Drum brake adjustment is made the same as on all other Volkswagens. On cars equipped with brake pressure regulators, refer to the repair manual for procedure to relieve hydraulic pressure if the rear wheels do not turn freely with shoes backed off. The parking brake is adjusted from inside the car. Each rear wheel is adjusted separately. First, loosen the lock nut on one parking brake cable and pull the lever to the second tooth. Then, tighten the adjusting nut until the affected rear wheel can hardly be turned by hand. Release the brake lever and make sure the wheel can turn freely before tightening the lock nut. Repeat the process to adjust the other rear wheel. Of course, the front wheels have disc brakes, but the calipers could be either of two designs, Teves or Girling. Either way, they have a unique wear signal that should appeal to customer and servicemen alike. Here's how it works. There is a 2mm high spot on the disc, as shown in yellow, which does not contact the pads until they are worn to the point where they need replacing. When the inside part of the pad contacts the high spot, rotation of the wheel will cause pulsating action, which is transmitted to the brake pedal. The driver can feel this bumping action when his foot is on the brake pedal. As we mentioned, some Rabbits and Sciroccos will be equipped with the new Girling caliper. So, we'll show how these calipers operate and how the pads are changed. First of all, most floating calipers are of the single piston design. In the Girling system, two pistons are used. One to apply pressure to one pad, while the other applies pressure to the floating frame or yoke, which in turn forces the opposite pad against the disc. You can check for wear of the pads visually, but this should not be necessary because the driver will be aware of the need for brake pad replacement if the brake pedal pulsates when the brakes are applied. Should you have to replace the pads, remove the wheel, then take out the bolt that holds the retaining pin assembly. With pliers, pull out the pin assembly. The spreader spring will fall off when this is done. Now, replace the pads. After reinstalling the pin assembly and retaining bolt, replace the spreader spring with the arrow down. Then put the wheel back on and you're done. With front wheel drive, you don't have to adjust front wheel bearings. But rear wheel bearings can and should be adjusted whenever necessary. Wheel bearing clearance is correct when the thrust washer can be moved with only a slight pressure on the screwdriver. After adjusting, secure the assembly with the lock nut and a new cotter pin. As mentioned earlier, the engine in the Rabbit and Scirocco is the same as the Dasher, 1500 cc, developing 70 horsepower at 5,800 RPM. Bore, stroke, and compression ratio are all identical. Featured on the engine is a new two-stage Zenith carburetor. Its operation is fully explained in the introductory service booklet. Normally, only two carburetor adjustments are necessary. The first adjustment is idle speed, set to between 900 and 1,000 RPM with the idle adjusting screw indicated by the arrow. Turning it to the left speeds up the engine, and to the right slows the engine down. Next, CO is adjusted by inserting the probe ahead of the catalytic converter by removing the cap on the EGR filter housing. Then, disconnect the air pump and adjust the carburetor mixture screw, as shown, until a CO value of 1.5 to 2.5% is obtained. This brings up the subject of emission controls. Full details of the devices on these two cars will be found in the booklet 1975 Fuel and Emission Devices, but we'll mention them briefly. We basically have three devices to control hydrocarbon and CO emissions and exhaust gas recirculation to reduce emissions of oxides of nitrogen. Let's look first at secondary air injection. Emissions of hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide are reduced by using an air pump by which fresh air is pumped into the exhaust manifold. The extra oxygen in the air allows the escaping hydrocarbons to continue burning, thus reducing their content at the tailpipe. With exhaust gas recirculation, some of the exhaust is fed back into the intake manifold. As a result, combustion chamber temperatures are lowered, thereby reducing the formation of nitrous oxide. The catalytic converter takes the HC and CO-laden exhaust and, in effect, cleans it up after it leaves the engine. The catalyst inside the converter triggers a chemical reaction which converts the undesired emission to harmless water vapor and carbon dioxide. For the catalytic converter to perform its function, it must operate at a very high inside temperature, over 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, so it is insulated from above and below. To bring the converter into operation as quickly as possible, a temperature-controlled ignition advance valve remains closed when the coolant temperature is below 136 degrees Fahrenheit. This results in retarded ignition timing. When the temperature exceeds 136 degrees, the valve opens, allowing the ignition to advance. As you know, cars equipped with catalytic converters must use unleaded fuel. Only the special nozzle on the unleaded fuel pump will fit the filler opening on these cars. If as little as 2 tankfuls of leaded fuel is used, the catalytic converter's effectiveness will be reduced by at least 75%. Here we see a close-up of the catalytic converter with the lower heat shield removed. When replacement is necessary, the entire converter is replaced. Earlier, you may have noticed the 2 warning lights on the dash. The one for exhaust gas recirculation, marked EGR, will light up after 15,000 miles, indicating a need for servicing. This includes visually inspecting the EGR system for leaks or damage, and then resetting the elapsed mileage odometer so that the EGR light goes off and the mechanism begins counting mileage again from 0. The CAT light button is reset in the same manner after the catalytic converter has been replaced. The CAT light will go on at 30,000 miles, indicating it is time to replace the catalytic converter. Should this light flash on and off at any time, it means the converter is overheating and the cause must be determined. Timing the Rabbit and Scirocco is slightly different from the Dasher. First, on manual transmission cars, this plug must be removed to reveal the timing mark on the flywheel. As usual, attach the dwell meter before timing, and be sure the dwell angle is between 44 and 50 degrees. Then, with the engine at normal operating temperature and running at the correct speed, aim the timing light into the hole and rotate the distributor until the timing mark appears opposite the notch. Don't be confused by the 2 diagnosis sensor indicators, the transmission removal alignment lug and the 0 or top dead center mark. This V-groove in the flywheel is the only mark you need be concerned with when timing the engine. On automatic transmission cars, there is no hole plug to be removed. The scribe line on the drive plate, which is 3 degrees after the top dead center mark, must be aligned with the stationary pointer on the bell housing, as shown here. Both the top dead center mark and timing mark will be visible in the hole when timing is correct. The final drive is all new, made necessary because of the transverse mounting of the engine. This drawing of the final drive assembly illustrates how sensible it is to mount the engine sideways. It means that the engine crankshaft and transmission turn parallel to the axle and wheels. Thus, it simplifies the transmittal of power from the engine through the drivetrain to the wheels. When the engine is removed, the transmission should come with it. However, the transmission can be removed from underneath without the engine. Adjustment for clutch pedal free play is quite simple. Loosen the lock nut at the end of the clutch cable on the top of the transmission. Then turn the plastic ring right or left until the proper amount of free play is felt at the clutch pedal. Then retighten the lock nut. The automatic transmission has also been simplified. Shifting is controlled mechanically by accelerator pressure rather than by vacuum as in the past. This means that accurate adjustment of accelerator cable linkage is of utmost importance for proper operation of the transmission. To check for proper accelerator cable adjustment, move the throttle lever on the carburetor to the fully closed position and be sure the choke is off. Remove the ball socket on the cable from the ball stud on the transmission lever. With the transmission lever held firmly to the left, it should be possible to press the ball socket onto the stud without tensioning the cable. If adjustment is necessary, proceed as follows. With ball socket in place on its stud, loosen the nuts on the carburetor bracket that hold the accelerator cable in position. Hold the transmission lever toward the left. Then adjust the tension with the rear nut on the carburetor bracket until there is no play in the cable. Lock the cable in this position with the front nut on the bracket. Finally, depress the accelerator pedal to the floorboard and adjust the pedal cable at the knurled plastic nut until there is no play in the cable. This assures that transmission kickdown will take place properly. We've talked about some of the highlights of repair procedures on the Rabbit and Scirocco, starting with the extended maintenance intervals. The suspension systems, including camber and toe-in adjustments. We covered the braking system, front wheel pad replacement, rear drum adjustment, as well as wheel bearing adjustment. The engine with its efficient transverse mounting and the new Zenith carburetor and its adjustments, and ignition timing as well. And finally, the manual transmission, including clutch adjustment and the automatic transmission with its very important linkage adjustment. At several points in this film, it was suggested that you refer to various publications for more detailed information. They are not textbooks, because it is assumed that you are familiar with basic automotive repair procedures. The most important is the new Volkswagen repair manual for Rabbit Type 17 and Scirocco Type 53. This manual should tell you most everything you need to know to replace, install, or adjust a component on the car. The manual is a brand new design that makes it easy for a mechanic to find what he's looking for in a hurry. First, the manual is organized into repair groups: general, engine, clutch and transmission, suspension, brakes and steering, heater and ventilation, and electrical. Most all information on assembly, disassembly, repairs, and adjustments will be found in its own section. This is page 3. Incidentally, these repair group identification numbers correspond to the first 2 digits of the repair time and warranty code found on product information circulars and in the suggested repair time book. Let's say you wanted to check the details on replacing a ball joint. In the suspension, brakes, and steering group, an arrow points to a number of pages that are black on the edges. This is called a thumb index, and your subject will be covered somewhere in these pages. But you might prefer to take one more step and turn to pages 4 and 5, where individual components are listed in alphabetical order. Under front wheel alignment, it says ball joint will be found on page 40.5. Turning to this page, we find detailed instructions on checking the wishbone and the ball joint and removal of the wishbone. On the following page, a clear illustration and detailed instructions are given for drilling out the rivets, enlarging the holes, and installing the new ball joint with 8mm bolts. If you need to see what the entire assembly looks like, an exploded view will be found at the beginning of the front wheel suspension section. This is true of each subject listed on the Repair Group's page. When a special tool is needed to make a proper repair, it is identified with the tool number, especially if it is new. Under the general section at the front of the book will be found such information as where to find the chassis number. Of particular importance in this grouping are the lifting instructions. Both Scirocco and Rabbit have a triangular mark on the side member for both the front and rear lifting locations. The hoist pads must be positioned under the welded flange at these points, as shown here. From time to time, supplements to the manual are issued when information is updated. When this happens, a sticker with the supplement number is attached to the page affected, and the supplement bulletin is bound into the back of the book cover. Then, anytime you see a red sticker on a page, be sure to check for the latest information. We've had a quick look at the highlights of the Scirocco and Rabbit. From a technical standpoint, these new Volkswagens are practically identical, as a careful study of the manual and these brochures will show. The Scirocco and Rabbit are brand new and exciting cars. They incorporate revolutionary advances never before built into production cars. They are the new generation of Volkswagens. Volkswagen of America Service Training.